Welcome, as Nicole was saying, to this webinar tonight. So it's focused on self-judgment, moving from self-judgment to self-kindness. And so we're going to get started. Feel free to ask questions, and maybe you can pop them into the chat if that's what you'd like to do, or you can jot them down and hold them. Might be better to just kind of wait till the end to get to the questions, and then we can kind of get a flow for the presentation. Okay. So I just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of an outline of what we're going to be covering tonight. So Nicole's already covered the introductions. We're going to do a short grounding activity in a second. And then I'll go over the session goals. We're going to then focus on kind of the substance of the presentation. And then there'll be some final tips and takeaways. And I do have some resources as well that I'm going to share at the end. Okay, so I'm not sure if you're sitting on a sofa, or if you're sitting on a chair, if you're at your kitchen table, or where you are right now tonight. But wherever you are, I'm going to invite you just for the next couple of minutes to just settle into a comfortable position. And maybe just starting, if you're comfortable, to close down your eyes just for a couple of minutes. And this exercise is really just about coming into our bodies, coming into the present moment. So we're just using a couple of minutes of mindfulness here to do that. So what I'm going to invite you to do after you've kind of adjusted what you need to adjust to be comfortable is just starting to notice any physical sensations that might be coming to your awareness in this moment. And that might just be contact with the chair or the sofa, wherever you're sitting. So just noticing those sensations, not necessarily having to do anything with them other than pay attention. And then on your next in-breath, just starting to notice the flow of the breath as it comes in and as it goes out again. To just allowing the full focus of your attention to be on your breath, on that flow, that inflow and the outflow. And then maybe just kind of noticing as well, moving away from the breath for just a second to notice if there's any thoughts circulating in this moment. There likely are. We have busy minds, which is perfectly normal. But just notice maybe whether it's a planning thought, or maybe it's just a daydream type thought. Maybe it's a thought about the past. Maybe it's a thought about the present. And then just doing a little scan and noticing if there's any particular emotions that you might be noticing in this moment. Kind of like an antenna, just kind of scanning around. And there may be nothing, and that's okay too. Then just removing your attention away from those elements and returning back to the physical sensations of the breath as it comes in and as it goes out again. Maybe noticing the floor under your feet, if your feet are connected with the floor, solidness of the floor under your feet. And the fact that your body is completely supported by the chair that you're sitting in or the sofa, wherever you are. And then just taking a couple of deep and satisfying breaths in and out again. So just kind of slowing this one down a bit, breathing in, pausing, and then breathing out again slowly. And then once more, breathing in, a little pause, and then breathing out again. The lovely thing about your breath is it is always with you. So you can access this grounding activity or this short mindfulness activity anytime that you wish. But for now, I'm going to invite you to open your eyes when you're ready. No rush, and just kind of come back to the room or the space that you're in. And again, welcome, and we're going to journey on. So I just wanted to start the presentation with a quote by someone that I'm sure most of you might be familiar with. If not, Brené Brown has done a lot of work on courage and vulnerability and empathy. And this quote just, again, it kind of epitomizes the whole topic that we're kind of diving into tonight. Talk to yourself like someone you would, or to someone that you love. So talk to yourself as you would to someone that you love. Okay, so that kind of just sets the tone for where we're going tonight. So the goals of the session: understanding self-judgment. These are what I'm hoping you're going to come away with. Being able to reframe self-judgment. Some practical ways to cultivate self-kindness, largely based on the work of Kristen Neff, but also Christopher Germer. And then kind of how self-kindness kind of connects to personal growth, that journey. And then we'll close with some reflection, a little bit of integration. And I'm going to, like I said, leave you with some resources if you want to dive a little more deeply into this topic. So understanding self-judgment. Most of us probably have some familiarity with this kind of maybe harsh critical response to our mistakes. I'm assuming that's maybe what's drawn you here. And so self-judgment has been defined by Kristen Neff as a harsh critical response to our perceived mistakes or failures, maybe our perceived inadequacies. And this often involves a rejection of our own emotions or our feelings, maybe shooting ourselves, and we shouldn't feel that way. We shouldn't have that feeling or that emotion. And what the result of this is, according to Neff, is it leaves us feeling isolated in our own suffering. So we're going through maybe a difficult experience, and then we feel like we're all alone in that. And so the impact of this harsh critical response is that we end up with this increased level of stress and anxiety, maybe a deeper sense of shame, difficulty making decisions. And obviously that's going to impact our self-worth, our feeling of value, and our ability to kind of bounce back, that resilience, right, that we want in the face of difficult experiences. So in the end, what it does is it keeps us stuck. It keeps us from being able to make those positive changes or move ahead in the way that we might like. And I want you to just take a moment to imagine that there is someone kind of following you around throughout your day. Imagine that this person is saying some mean things, they're saying some critical things to you every time you make a mistake, or every time you are uncertain, or every time you're kind of dropping a ball, that they're kind of on you and saying, you know what, that was really dumb. How could you think about doing that? Imagine this person following you around throughout your day and what that would be like. Most of us wouldn't want to spend a lot of time with that person. We'd probably find the first opportunity we had to kind of move away, extricate ourselves. You know what, I've got things to do. Sorry, we'll connect later, much later. But imagine that person, that being you can disconnect from. Yes, we can get ourselves away from those negative people. But here's the thing, with ourselves, we're the only person in the world that we can never get away from. So imagine if that critical voice is coming from within us, right? And so again, here's an invitation to just think about, if you do experience that inner critic or that kind of high bar of perfectionism, how does that show up? How does that show up for you? And you might want to pop this in the chat, thinking about, that critical voice. What does that sound like? Is that a loud voice? Does that sound like a voice from the past? Does that sound like someone maybe that has been in your life or is currently in your life? And again, just kind of noticing and reflecting on maybe the origins of that for just a moment. So again, knowing that we might have that inner critic kind of present, showing up for us, we're going to move forward now, and we're going to see about some different ways that we can kind of manage that. So one of the tools that I want to share with you tonight, oops, sorry about that, reframing self-judgment. So this comes from the cognitive behavioral therapy kind of realm, and it's called cognitive restructuring or cognitive reframing. And so what we're going to do when we use this tool is we're going to just kind of identify that inner voice. We're going to identify that inner critic, and we're going to notice what are our thoughts? So there's that mindful awareness. We did that little exercise, that's mindfulness. We did a little scan of our thoughts. We kind of took that moment to kind of identify what is actually going through my mind. So we're thinking about what we're thinking about, right? Which again, of course, takes a moment, takes time to slow that down. And then we're going to pause and we're going to examine it and we're going to say, does that actually make sense? Is that rational? Is there any evidence to support that? And maybe would even one of my friends, if I kind of ran that by my friend, would that friend agree? So in doing this, we're kind of becoming a little bit of a detective, a little bit of a sleuth, if you will. And we're kind of looking for, being a little curious around our thoughts and just kind of saying, well, is that true? Am I actually a stupid person? No, because maybe there's no evidence for that. Yes, I make mistakes. That makes me a human being. So then we're moving to that next piece, which is reframing, right? So when we reframe, what we're doing is we're taking those harsh critical statements and we're actually replacing them or we're modifying them with a kinder, softer message, a softer tone, maybe something we would say to a friend. You know what? Of course you made that mistake. Of course that just makes you human. So again, noticing and being able to kind of dial down the intensity or just kind of setting aside that message from that harsh critical voice and saying what we would say to a friend. So again, here's an opportunity for reflection. What I'm going to invite you to do is just for a moment, think about a recent experience where maybe you engaged in that kind of self-criticism, that self-judgment. And then think about what could I have said differently? What could I change? And how could I exercise a more compassionate response to myself? If I called myself a name, could I say, well, no, that's not really true? Or could I just say, again, that makes sense. You were tired. Of course, that happens. Um, and again, thinking about your own particular situation just for a moment. And again, if you have some ideas about compassionate responses that you might want to use, you could pop those into the chat as well. So we're going to move on now, and we're going to talk a little bit how to really cultivate that self-kindness approach. So the definition, and I'm going to use self-kindness and self-compassion kind of interchangeably here tonight. So Christopher Germer, who is one of my favorite authors, and this is from one of his books that I've really, kind of delved into because I loved his work so much. And it is going to be in the resource page, but he's defined self-compassion as a desire to alleviate our own suffering. So compassion would be a desire to alleviate the suffering of others. But the self-compassion piece is taking care of ourselves, just as we would someone that we love dearly. So kind of the equivalent would be on a physical level of putting a Band-Aid on your finger if you cut it in order for it to heal, maybe putting some polysporin on. But this is taking care of ourselves on an emotional level. So it's kind of the same idea, but just we're taking care of our own emotional state versus our physical state, which again is that kind of analogy. And then Kristen Neff, who is also one of my favorite authors on this topic, she has identified what she calls three pillars or three components of self-compassion. And so she has included self-kindness as one of these pillars. So she refers to self-kindness as just being kind and supportive to ourselves when we suffer, when we make a mistake, when we feel inadequate. Again, whether that's real or whether that's perceived, that might be our own just harsh judgment of ourselves, whichever it is, just coming alongside ourselves and showing that support as we would to a friend. And then she has also added in these other components. So one being that idea of common humanity. So that just kind of refers to this idea that we are all connected. And when we suffer, we're just, again, that's part of the human experience. So just acknowledging, yes, we're all kind of in this experience together at some point or another, people that we love, that we care about, strangers, and we see it on the news, of course, we see suffering, right? So the idea is that this connects us as human beings, as part of the human race. It doesn't separate us from others. We're not the only ones going through these difficulties. Similar experiences are also what other people are experiencing. And then the other component that Kristen Neff brings in is this idea of mindfulness. And that again is that skill of being able to kind of pause and then accept and turn towards that present moment experience. And in this case, acceptance of the pain or acceptance of the suffering, and knowing that we're going to be okay, knowing that we can do that. And we can bring in these other elements of that self-kindness. We can add in these other skills that are going to be helpful to us. And we're going to take some time tonight to kind of go a little bit more deeply into that. But knowing that we are not alone in our suffering also goes a long way to kind of helping us manage and cope. And then when we bring in that self-compassionate voice and that supportive presence of ourselves towards ourselves, that just really helps us to kind of navigate these experiences. So we're going to talk a little bit about some different techniques to cultivate self-kindness. So here's a couple of practical ones. We've already kind of touched on this one a bit. Talking to yourself the way that you would a good friend. Again, thinking about what's going through my mind, maybe changing up some of that self-talk if it's negative or harsh or critical, and then bringing alongside that maybe a voice of a friend, someone that you look at as a source of support. Or alternatively, imagine that you have a friend who's going through a difficult situation. And what would you say to them? How are you supporting them? And then saying those same things to yourself. So we all are probably quite skilled at giving compassion to others. So we have the skill. We're not learning a new skill of compassion. We're just turning that around towards ourselves and offering that same source of support towards ourselves in those moments when we're suffering, when we need that comfort. So what I'm going to ask you to do in the next couple of minutes is just a very short visualization exercise. And I will ask you to close your eyes, but that's up to you if you can do this without. I just find closing my eyes when I'm doing a visualization exercise really helpful, kind of minimizes distractions in the room. But imagine yourself at your most compassionate. And that could be when you've been with a friend who's suffering, when you've been with a loved one, maybe a family member, maybe a pet. Doesn't have to be a person. And imagine, you're offering compassion to this loved one, this person or this being who's suffering. So I just want you to sit with that for a moment, kind of drawing on that compassion that is already there. And then imagine again, in a difficulty, in a moment of difficulty, that version of yourself comforting you. Okay, so you've got that compassionate vision of yourself coming alongside, maybe giving you a pat on the shoulder, maybe just kind of standing beside you. But that is that part of you that it just sort of innately, it has that compassionate stance, and you're just offering that to yourself. And just noticing the comfort that you draw from that. All right, so we're going to move on. And now what we're going to do, I have two different exercises here because I couldn't decide which one I wanted to use tonight. But I have settled on the loving kindness exercise. And so what we're going to do is just take a few minutes and we're going to actually practice giving ourselves compassion in a more, I would say, a more constructive or active way. And so I'm going to invite you again, adjust anything that you need to adjust in terms of your sitting position, be comfortable, and just taking a moment now to close down your eyes as we start to move into this exercise. And we are going to start again by just focusing on your breathing. And the idea here is we are switching off that doing mode where we actively do or think about things, and we're really just kind of switching into a being mode. Just being still, being with yourself, your body, your mind, your breath in this moment. And just focusing in on your breath, noticing the flow of the breath as it comes in and as it goes out again. Not trying to change your breathing in any way, but just allowing it to flow in and to flow out naturally and normally. And then I'm going to invite you to just start to bring to mind, again, a little bit of a visualization exercise here, but to bring to mind an image of a loved one. So this could be, again, could be a person that could be a friend, it could be a family member. It doesn't have to be someone who's living, it could be someone who's passed on. It could be a child, it could be a grandparent. It could also be a pet. But this individual or this being is just someone who just automatically brings a sense of joy to your heart, brings a smile to your face when you think about this loved one, this being. So again, once you have, and sometimes I know it's difficult to settle on just one individual, but for the purpose of this exercise, we are going to choose just one person or one being. And once you have that being in mind and you have that image created, I'm going to invite you to think about the fact that this loved one, this being, desires to live a life free from suffering, just as all beings do. And so what we're going to do for the next couple of minutes is just really offer some supportive phrases, some kind and warm phrases to this individual, this loved one. And just in your mind's eye, imagine saying these phrases. Imagine extending this kindness to your loved one. May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you live a life free from suffering. And may you live with ease. And just savoring any warmth or compassion that arises in your heart towards your loved one as you're extending these phrases, these well wishes, words of kindness and support. Just for a moment. And now I'm going to invite you to include yourself. Imagine in your mind's eye, again, that picture of yourself sitting with your loved one. Maybe you're holding hands. If it's a pet, maybe you're petting your pet, but you're just sitting there together. And now extending these phrases to both of you. So may we be healthy. May we be happy. May we live a life free from suffering. And may we live with ease. And again, just savoring the warmth and compassion that arises from your heart as you extend these phrases, these wishes for happiness and health towards your loved one and to yourself. And now, for the remainder of the exercise, I'm just going to ask you to release that image of your loved one. Focus your attention just on yourself, just as you're sitting here tonight, maybe seeing if there's any stress or tension, or noticing if there's any stress or tension that you might be holding. And then just offering these same phrases to yourself. May I be healthy. May I be happy. May I live a life free from suffering. May I live my life with ease. And again, noticing any warmth or compassion that arises in your heart towards yourself in this instance. And maybe there's other phrases that would resonate or be ones that you would be more inclined to kind of gravitate towards. So just thinking in this moment, if there are any other phrases you'd like to offer yourself, or maybe phrases that you would like to hear from other people towards you, and just offering yourself those same phrases. And then just taking a moment to rest quietly in your own body. Again, noticing any warmth or compassion that arises. And then I'm going to invite you to take a couple of deep and satisfying breaths in and out again. And one more, just breathing in and breathing out again. And then whenever you're ready, again, there is no rush. You can open your eyes and return to the room, to the screen. Welcome back. So that exercise, about 5 or 6 minutes, that is something you can practice. And this is a very practical way to start cultivating self-kindness or self-compassion. It really just takes a few minutes, and it's an investment. And if it felt a bit awkward to offer these phrases to yourself, that is very normal, especially at the beginning. If you're not used to offering yourself self-compassion, it does feel a bit strange or a bit awkward. So this is what we consider a practice, okay? And I'll touch on that a little bit more in a few slides. So just moving on, these are some other ways, and again, thinking about this on a practical level. This is from Christopher Germer's kind of perspective, is that he's kind of identified these 5 different avenues or ways or pathways that we can offer ourselves self-kindness, self-compassion. So thinking about this on these different in these different facets of our lives physically, in what ways do you currently care for yourself on a physical level? Maybe there are new ways that you can offer yourself, maybe to release some stress or some tension. Maybe you want to sign up for a yoga class. Maybe you want to practice mindfulness. Maybe there's some other thing that you would like to do. Maybe it's booking a massage. So there's different ways that we can kind of add in that element of self-kindness. Maybe there's things we're already doing. Maybe we're doing great in this area, which is awesome. Continue. And then thinking about it from a mental perspective or from our mind, how do we care for our own minds, especially when we're under stress? And again, thinking about what we've already kind of talked about a little bit is that, what does that self-talk look like? What are we saying to ourselves when we're under, some pressure or we're having a difficult moment? Are we using some supportive phrases? Are there things that we can offer ourselves? This will not last forever. This too shall pass. Things like that. But are there other ways that you can kind of incorporate this softening approach, again, as we talked about a little bit earlier? Thinking about ourselves on that emotional level, again, this is making space for some of those difficult emotions. And again, taking that time to kind of sit with, again, using the mindfulness practice, using the self-compassion practices that we've talked about. Caring for ourselves emotionally involves also validating our right to feel what we feel. Our emotions aren't good or bad, actually. They're just emotions. And all of us have a different range of experience with emotions. And in any given day, we're going to have a wide variety, a wide range. And those emotions are there. And really, if you look at it, they're kind of like signals, right? They're giving us information about what's happening for ourselves. But starting to think about ways that we can validate our right to feel what we feel, and then also tapping into maybe some new activities that give us joy. And so what are some of those things maybe you've been wanting to try? What are some of those things that maybe a new hobby that you've been wanting to engage in? Or things that you just automatically find some joy in. So, for example, for myself, I love walking on the trails this time of year. I love getting out in nature. It's one of the ways that I just feel like, again, it's a bit of a reset. So, giving yourself more of some of those things is a way of caring for yourself on an emotional level. And then thinking about our relationships, in what ways do you care for yourself in your relationships? So we have sometimes a tendency when we're going through difficulties to isolate or withdraw from support of others. But in actual fact, connecting with others is a form of self-care. So reaching out or leaning into those supportive relationships, those people in your life that are there for you when you are going through that difficult time, and taking time to just share and be vulnerable, as Brene Brown would say. And then on a spiritual level, and this doesn't have to be in any sort of formal religious sense, we're just talking about those intangible aspects of ourselves. Maybe people refer to it as God, maybe people refer to soul, maybe just different values that we hold, like love, peace, truth, maybe some sacred connections, but finding out different ways to kind of, again, connect with this aspect of ourselves that isn't quite so concrete, and maybe a little more transcendent. And even just contacting, with nature, like for me, that is a really spiritual experience. The miracle of day-to-day life, the sun came up today. What are we grateful for? That's another way of kind of taking care of ourselves on that spiritual or more, again, transcendent level. So now we're kind of just moving on to talk about personal growth and how self-kindness relates to personal growth. And so there are so many benefits, and this doesn't really even begin to cover all of them, the ones that are listed on the slide here, but it does definitely help with our decision making. Because what we're doing is we're supporting ourselves. We have more trust in our ability to make decisions. So we're not going to be doing as much second guessing. We're going to be able to kind of trust our judgment and believe that we have that ability to make good decisions. We're going to have that increased sense of confidence and a felt sense of safety and security. And that is so important. That, again, comes from that sense of, I've got my own back. I'm supporting myself, and I'm that kind of person in my corner I can depend on. I'm not, again, criticizing or, kind of, again, putting myself down. I'm actually supporting myself. This supports emotional resilience, that ability, as I mentioned earlier, to kind of bounce back from difficult experiences, that ability to kind of ride through stressful events in our lives, navigate those, and it reduces symptoms of anxiety and depression. And this is all supported by research. It improves our overall sense of life satisfaction. And just thinking back to maybe some of those experiences tonight, if you engaged in those exercises that we did, how that just kind of maybe things settled a little bit for you. Maybe you felt that sense of, support when we did that compassion exercise. So again, this is all supported by research, but personal growth, of course, is a journey. It's not an endpoint, it's not a goal. It's what I view as a lifelong journey. And so the reflective activity that I'm hoping we won't really have time to get into tonight, but if you want, you can take some time maybe in the next week and write a short letter to yourself as if it were from the most compassionate, kind, supportive friend that you have or can bring to mind. And write it from that perspective, but acknowledging what's happening in your own life and the support that you would like to hear from that compassionate friend. All right, so we are getting close to the end here. So this is just a few closing reflections and a way of kind of integrating the information that we've touched on tonight. So, key takeaways, as I mentioned, this is a journey. It is not a destination. We didn't get to the point of, if we were engaging or have been engaging in a lot of self-judgment, we didn't get here overnight. This is taking years, right? So it's going to take some time to kind of turn that around and to make some of these changes. And as I mentioned before, it's going to feel a little bit awkward at first to start engaging in self-compassion or self-kindness. It might not feel genuine at first, but it just takes time to kind of become comfortable with the idea that, yes, I too, as a human being, deserve to feel that support and that kindness. And again, thinking about the fact that, you know what, I'm the only person in the world I can never get away from. Maybe I should start befriending myself. So again, the journey, being kind to yourself as you engage on this journey, you're not going to ever be perfectly self-compassionate. I'm sorry to those perfectionists in the room. Um, but yeah, this is, again, we're learning from our mistakes. We're learning as we go along. And when we have those days where we've been a little harsh, that's even more of an opportunity to bring in kindness and say, of course, that's the pattern I've been engaging in for years. It's not going to change overnight. And then again, an invitation to choose just one practice to try over this next week. So maybe it is going to be that compassionate letter. Maybe it's going to be practicing the loving kindness exercise. Maybe it's going to be, again, changing that inner self-talk or taking care of yourself on a more physical level. Maybe just pop some of those ideas into the chat, and we'll have a chance to kind of talk about those. Um, and I am just going to wrap up again with Brene Brown because I really do love her work. And her perspective is that the core of mental toughness is actually self-compassion. And I love this because sometimes people have this idea that self-compassion is just this, oh, I'm just going to kind of lay around and do nothing. It actually helps us to kind of move through, it strengthens us. So it strengthens that mental ability to not slip into shame, to not indulge in that self-critical or self-loathing stance, and to actually support ourselves. So I love this phrase or this quote from Brene Brown. So this is her perspective. This is actually exercising self-compassion. Okay. So I just moved us on to our resource page. So Brene Brown's website, if you want to check out her stuff, that's where I got the quote from. And then Christopher Germer, that's his book, The Mindful Path to Self-Compassion. That's the book I have right now. It is an older book, but it's a great resource. And I think it's available in most public libraries now. And then, of course, Kristen Neff's book on self-compassion as well. And this is really her personal journey of how she kind of, I guess, started to experience self-compassion and that life-changing experience for her was so transformational. And then I've got some Harvard Health 4 ways to boost your self-compassion. If you need some ideas, there's a YouTube video by Christopher Germer that you might want to check out. The other thing I put on Kristen Neff's website because she has a self-compassion test. So if you're curious, and if you want to check that out, you can actually get a little assessment. I think there's about 26 questions. It's pretty quick. And you get the results back, and it can be quite informative. Then at least you know kind of where you're starting, right? And I find that kind of fun to do those things. So I just want to say thank you so much for your time and attention tonight. I hope you've learned some things. I hope this has been helpful. Please don't hesitate to follow up if you would like more information.